Good. Okay. All right. I have a very funny title today. It's called Run for Documents. Well, I am 1.6 meters short, and I'm slightly overweighted, so running is not my topic. I am a golfer, and that means that that's very good transferable into our industry, our background, what we have to do, what to think, because, well, we only have every shot once. When you work a lot in regulatory, you don't have so much time to iterate. You have to wait. You have a notified body, you give your end documentations, and then you wait for response. Most times, unfortunately, it takes a lot of time. So, until you get your next shot. So you need to appreciate every result you get, and you need to make sure that you get the best out of your done effort. And that's the point. That's why I really like that background on here, because that is exactly what I want to go in and what I want to deal with. Because we had in the past within the company with my lots of colleagues, we have found many things about documentation issues, hurdles, who comes first, what comes as the last one, where is the chicken, where is the egg, and do we ever have a chicken or egg, or if it's just every kind of amphibious. So we need to talk about that. And by talking about documentation control, you always have one thing in mind, and that is what I have in here. That is, and hopefully now my picture changes, that is what you have when you think about documentation. You have a huge stack, which does not make much fun. So, yeah, unfortunately, that is the point. This picture was particular one day of an FDA inspection where we had to prove something, but that's okay. It's symbolic for all of the things which EU MDR and also EU MDD brought to us. So it was already in the past, but now it's, well, let me phrase it that way. MDD always had some kind of enforcement already in, and it took us 25 years from MDD to MDR to realize what we should be doing, because nobody logged it. So right now, everyone's watching it, everyone's looking into the real topics, and then suddenly we get the burden. And that is the point in the systematic, in the field, what we have. And looking into a stack of documentation, you always think about, oh my God, that's so annoying, that's so lame. But yes, that's the point. It's lame, it's annoying, but we need to live with that. And when you think about each of the documents, you can see all of the black paper clips in there. Each document has a relation to maybe 1, 2, maybe 10 of the other documents. And really, that's the point which really makes us a big problem. And I will talk about now about particular effects. I go back, since Peter told lots of great stuff about the requirements, points from the requirement, how they can be linked. I also included traceability, which I think it's very great, because then I don't need to talk about that. And I will keep off all the development parts and focus on the much better, bigger, and much more pragmatic and easy to use regulatory and clinical rules. Yeah. Sarcasm aside, we need to talk about all the other documents in addition to the requirement stuff about what is the product. And that's the thing. We talk about a product. We talk in every kind of aspects. And that's something many people forget when they see the regulatory people and the clinical people working with the product. Yes, they still work with you on the same product, and they want to work with every developer. It's not that we don't like you. It is the ways that we try to understand you and try to get the best out of it. It's not always happening that easy, but that is what we want you to achieve, and what we want you to see in our collaboration, what we want to get together. And therefore, we have our boundaries as well as you have. So as a regulatory affairs or a clinical affairs team member or specialist, I do not want to impact your product requirement and your product design. And that's what I also beg from the developers. Please do not impact me too much from the requirements, from the design, because it all gets back for me. And yes, the later you tell me, the later it haunts me. And that's unfortunate as since we create the general safety performance requirements as well as the declaration of conformity, it mostly haunts us and it hits us very bad at the end. And that's why I think about sync points. And since I came from not only from software development, I come from electronics and mechanic development as well. And therefore, I want you to take in the concept about timing diagrams. And timing diagrams can help a lot about that situation and a lot about the points to get the right track on products and also get the right documentation available when needed. And that is the thing. It always starts, as you all know, with the intended purpose of the device. Without it, I cannot do anything. That's my true and only basis. That's my, as you have done it in many of the minutes ahead, that's my design input. That's my design input. And that is what I need to take. I don't develop, I do regulatory. And therefore, this is my design input, and everything else beyond it is more or less design output, even if it has different namings, different things. So first layer with all the intended purpose stuff, that's normally quite easy because that's first, there's a classification, there's what it is, and it's good. It's okay for that now. And that's at that point easy. It gets more tricky if we talk about the second layer, and the second layer is the point about the planning layer. So where we have additional planning documentations from the side, from the clinical evaluation plan, the risk management plan, and the also development and test plans. Yes, from development plans. So if you have the software as a medical device, software development plan, that's in most cases super easy. Then we have an additional one for many medical electrical products, and that's the EMC test plan. And since 2014, you all know, the test house is not allowed to create that plan anymore. So you as a manufacturer need to do that, and they shall review. And therefore, it is a bit different now, and you need to have a profound knowledge about how to deal with the EMC test planning. It creates it. Can someone please stop muting me? Thank you. And it creates interactions about particular particular requirements from the technical side and also from the documentation side. And then actually at that point, as a regulatory, I'm only interested in getting into the next layer about the stuff for the user documentation, user requirement, and all that stuff. So actually, this is really the end or the first attempt of the collaboration. That is where we have our interaction together, and that is actually the important stuff from my side. And here we get into the real crunch zone and the discussions about what needs to be first and what needs to be second. And the only point, and actually this is now the only point as a regulatory professional where I have an impact on the product. What means that? We had that, funnily, we had that already in the discussion today in my office that morning about regulatory requirements as EU MDR requires you also in Article 10.9 that you have a regulatory strategy and a regulatory requirements and how to bring them into the products. And that is something which is very, very important for the complete combination, what you want to do, how you do your development, and also how your product has been limited. So at that point, that's unfortunately, one of the only point where I have the opportunity to get impact on the product, where I have the opportunity to impact the product and get more details into it. So when I have now my first interaction band, my user requirements, product requirements, so it's technically designed, so what I would consider already the end of the design input, then it goes to the next point about and that's something which is luckily now very commonly used, the use specification, where you have now the interaction of about that kind of level on user level or user story level, user need level, you going to directly design requirements, the technical design requirements for a product. That helps a lot about the particular things for your next step when you go to the layer about risk and literature. At that layer, there we get into our technological assessment about the risks. Literature search can be done individually. So now we get line by line through that and can go from the risk management plan to the analysis, from the clinical evaluation plan to the literature analysis or literature search, literature review, whatever you want to call it. But with this is the topics about the interaction you have at first through documentations. And so you get links. You get linking requirements about each of them. So right now, still easy because it's linear. I want to bring it now later on in a step where it gets more in a timing situation, where it gets more fun and more direct. So yes, actually, after that first attempt, so it's not only linear, it's after that the bulk of stones for you building your complete house. After that, you get to the software, you get to design, you get to labeling, you get to mechanical design, you get to hardware design, whatever. Design output, all that stuff in the middle where you have your particular interest from the technical things about product requirements, product implementation, technical testing, all that stuff, preparing for the technical analysis, prototyping, whatever. That is actually the only thing about having R&D directly in my trunk as an R&D manager. So when you think about how we align, okay, I think product management, and some kind of R&D comes first. Then we get on track together. We are on the same road for a moment. Then we completely go to the parking lot as a regulatory affairs, whilst you all do more of the development side, defining, redefining. Once we get back, we organize together to go on the risk management level. Then we drop out, you do more of the other stuff. Then we come back, give you information from laws, standards, and all that stuff. Then we go back out of the boat. Then you do more stuff about the development, all the stuff about the requirements to implement it. You get the prototype, and then we come back with the first implementation of the standard topics about the formative evaluation and all that what is related to that. Relation means also that we have all the informations required for making sure that we have particular informations about the documentations are needed, all the levels where we get a validation to be included first with the design checklists, with the design recommendations and other stuff. But then we get into the next step about really starting with release, validation, and summative evaluations, where we get into the real final of the product. So as you can see, the house is being built up quite fast at that point. We get into a design release. We need to ensure that we have all the efforts done we wanted to plan. So we look back to the plannings, we look into the validation. Do we have sufficient information needed for the design to validate its performance, as well as validating its, so how's it called in former times? It was validation of the use of the device, the usage. So it's now the summative evaluation, but that's just for the correctness of the standards. And that, based on this point, then we are able to, what I expect is a closed part of the overall schematic. So looking into that is normally the part of the housing setup of the what we could consider for the technical documentation. Yes, so lots additional more. However, that's the basic stuff. So, but now looking into it, I want to ask you to remove that layer, which is not relevant for regulatory, but it's relevant for R&D. So where we have no conflicts to each other. And looking into that, it's quite simple. It's the only thing where the documentation and documentation linkage, documentation document release cycles don't have any further interaction and especially no burdens to each other is on the middle layer, when we get all the stuff about the design and development done. It's lucky you are the developers. You're fine out of the box. whilst we in the regulatory side, we still have the problem. And that's a big problem caused in many cases by UMDR. Well, it's not directly caused by UMDR, it's highlighted, or let's call it enforced. It's nicer to be known as that. And that is what we have for the next steps. So based on this particular layering and based on the information we get through documentation, so each of them, how they can be organized, I want to align those with a quite easy and simple systematic. So I'm a bit from a development. I'm not a good developer. That's why I went to regulatory. I'm not good at development. I try to do that to make it more easy to understand, and that is what I've tried to utilizing it in an easy systematic diagram. So first, aligning it by having it highlighted what comes in which direction to make sure that I have endpoints and time points. And that is my interaction and my first timing to see, hey, what is the overlap and what is the optimized overlap. So when I look into the current situation, when I look into the slide here, what's starting, how it overlaps, how it integrates, what it came to the next step. So that is actually best case modeling. However, I want best case modeling. If I do a bad case modeling, it does not bring me a good system. If I want to have a good process, I need to take the best case model. And that is what I try to organize in that way. Actually, from my perspective, I think that most of our procedures, most of the SOPs about design and development, who include all the kind of charts and documentations, does not state it that way because you don't want to tell, you want to do it exactly that route. You want to have the boxes circulating later to each other, to up counting to each other, which does not make too much good situation, a good information for the user of the documentation. And then you have most likely very weak words at the end to tell you, yes, we include that all of our packages can be done concurrent to each other and do not need to be follow-up. However, they are drawn in a follow-up manner to make it easier to visualize. All right, you just told me that your procedure is not as it should be. That is what you told me with the sentence. And I see the sentences a lot in my documentations I read. So I got a lot of SOPs for reviewing. I'm on the way as an auditor in many cases, and therefore I see loads of such things. And this, to be absolutely honest, really, really, really annoys me to see that you have a good structured procedure you want to follow, but at the end you say, yes, but if you do it differently, it's okay. No, it's not. No, it is not okay. You need to do it exactly as you want and exactly as you describe it. And that is that's your way. And unfortunately, and that is something which I really miss, is that many of the electronic peoples are writing SOPs. Why? Because of timing diagrams are much nicer. Because you see faster and better interactions instead of using pools, swim lanes, diagrams, which show you just interactions about responsibility and particular stuff, things, whilst not getting the full view. Actually, and I am very, very brutal on that point, there's no real good tool which helps you to do that correctly. You cannot use a tool to do the things you want to create from the basic of your procedures in your mind. So that's not good to be used. So however, there are lots of tools that help you to make it easy to be usable and reusable, editable, but not for getting the correct content. And the content is something you need to define. So, okay, we are still in the gray world. So we're still on that part where we think about the particular problem. So we solved the housing situation where we got a bulk interaction, which does not help us. We now got in a more linear, two-dimensional situation, which tells you, yes, that it's a bit better. However, it's not the full picture. So we need to get more into that, to get more strict and clear pathways to understand what we want to achieve and what we don't want to go for. And that is when we go onto the bright side of the life, where we go on the level where we get interaction. So looking into that, Many people, many companies had, prior they went to Agile, they had a stage gate procedure. They had simple stage gate processes. With Agile, we are getting more fragmented, we get more scattered into particular requirements, but not into a documentation world. So it is good to use Agile in the part of development a good product. Unfortunately, it's a mess in producing good documents. So we need to have the trade-off now. Do we want to have a good document or do we want to have a good product? Yes, we want to have a good product. And also, I want to have a clear documentation. So if I cannot aim for best documentation because I need to do the trade-off to Agile, which causes me more worries in the documentation side, but makes me a better product, then I need to take something in which helps me to get somehow transparent and consistent documentation in addition to the Agile development. And that is what we all have in our release procedures. So we have our releases, and what is important for me now to see about the particular interest, which document has an impact on each other. So, and that's normally what you do as a process manager. You bind in all that fancy stuff to get to all of them together, to link them, and you start with the first one. The first one is the first package about all the planning documentation. Easy saying, hey, they're super cool. And then, well, you need to tag in on the second package. And the second package goes a bit further. It goes about the user requirements, use specification, risk analysis, and literature search. Why? Many people think you can do risk analysis and literature search and the user requirements independently from each other. Yes, you can. But you lose a lot of traction and lose lots of good things. You can do that, but you waste. You waste effort. And so use requirements, use specification, the product requirements also shall have some part of your clinical requirements which relates to your literature search. So it's part of it. So the user requirement alone, the intended purpose of the device translate into user requirements. And that is something you really need to watch out because those are important for having your next step about the documentation, especially when you talk about the literature searches, you want to have all your user needs and your clinical claims covered correctly. And that is important. And the importance need to be very, very carefully challenged. So you got the next package. The next package, user requirements, product requirements, use specifications from usability, risk analysis, and literature search. So when you look at them, you find the next step about the, okay, you always have clinical, development, and risk. Now you have development, risk, clinical, user and usability. Yes, usability was not in the planning layer earlier, so it's a bit later on. So, and now we go on to the big point. You see, we have 4 documents left, but that's not everything. So when I talk about the regulatory release and the regulatory strategy, how to want to do that, I need to have a way bigger package. And that package is report of the risk management, report of the clinical evaluations, the summative evaluation, it's closer of them all, it's the close of the formative evaluation, the literature search, and the risk analysis as one package. So that's now a big thing. I skip traceability of requirements and the verification. Now I skip that by intention not to overblow the content of this presentation. So these 3 steps, these 3 are my required stages, my required documentation package compounds where I think about how to bind them together and make sure that I have them in the best possible situation and structured way. All the others are very well to be established together, but however, those 3 packages are relevant because they have a very clear interaction. And hey, we see a lot of documentations and a lot of packages and products, but everything was signed on the same day. As an auditor, I think about that if that was a good development. And then normally I see that when my user requirements, my verification, my architecture, my risk analysis, my validation, and my clinical evaluation was signed on the same day and or released on the same day, there's something stupid happening. And if I see that, and I know there's something weird, I want to dig into that. Because I know that you cannot do all the interactions instead of you just release everything and wait everything to be open. So you have a mismatch in the beginning. And that mismatch is costing you effort. So you waste effort again. And that's something you want to avoid. And so let's then go into the next presentation. That just takes the first big step where I combine the documentation and want to deal about them more specifically because those are the worst. Binding my plans together, binding my specifications together, that's normally quite simple during production and development. But now I have the interaction layers of particular documentations, which are not that easy. And when I think about that, you can see a lot of the funny slides dealing with that. So I go directly to that and show you, this is my interaction. That's the interaction model. That's the timing, timelines, and the interaction, who, big part, gives information to the targeted line as an arrow. So we need to make sure that we have congruent development as well as the part of the particular impact. And that is something which we see a lot where we have particular missing impacts and things which we need to bind out in a very, very good and hard way. So when we start about with the three layers, risk analysis, formative evaluation, and literature search can in most cases work simply standalone to each other. So once I have given my impact from the risk analysis first to the literature search in the beginning, where I have my clinical claims done, when I have my all the information for the clinical evaluation planning done into that and brought it into the literature search, then it brings me back also from the risk analysis, the severe events, all the interactions, everything which happened, which we know which had happened, the databases from MOD, BFARM, whatever, Swissmedics, the analysis, go back to the analysis, the evaluation, and the risk and the clinical evaluation report. Once that is settled, then we get into the next layer on about what you see right here. And that is what I do in my timing in the release of the documentations. You always see that when I go backwards, only when I go, or definitely when I go arrow-wise, that's an important thing, and all the other documents are following. So I start with formative evaluation, which leads me to summative evaluation, clinical evaluation report, and the risk analysis, because those have impact. Those have particular impact. Yes, there are many companies who do a literature search and have formative evaluation content in the literature search. I can understand that. I avoid that on the documentation trunk because it is causing a lot of additional troubles which are not needed because I don't need it in the literature search. I can go directly through the CER. That's way easier. And also with the risk analysis that I have the interactions, I need them because formative evaluation is the design thinking process and the design knowledge, which gives me information about my severability ratings as well as my mitigations. So that is something which needs to be included, same as on giving it more information for the summative evaluation to do it with the next step to say, okay, that is now my final validatable device. And that is now from that end, going towards the next two steps, because I've done my summative evaluation, I've done my summative evaluation, maybe a validation of the device that now I know by heart, I know every step which happened, I know my statistics about problems, and that is something which does not get back. It does. I get a lot of documentations. When you have done your summative evaluations, you always will find issues. You always. If you don't find any, your evaluation was not good enough. You will not achieve 100% perfect evaluations. It's mathematically, it's statistics, and it's human. So it's very unlikely, and I don't believe it, if it's 100%. I will try to challenge it. So that information, in many cases, it gets information back to the clinical evaluation report. But then we see a lot of documentation, a lot of analysis or a summative evaluation and risk analysis comparisons when that summative evaluation did not get back the track into the risk analysis, which is very bad. because that you get here your probability and severity level based on your evaluation. You get it. You get the data. You get real data, and that should be part of your risk analysis. After mitigation, that is what you have done. That you are what you have evaluated. And this is that's the point where you need to get it backwards to the systematic, where you need to get it into our risk analysis to make sure we have a complete, and as Peter said it, we need to have it complete. This was a requirement for requirements, however, it's also for risk management. We need to have it complete in that way, and that is very important to get all of the content covered. So now I got the information. So when time goes by, it's in only most cases, it's only a few days left. So literature analysis, literature search, literature reviews is done and will bring the information to the clinical evaluation report, luckily. And based on that, we can populate our risk management report. So risk management report, oh, wait, I've missed 1 second. Also from the risk analysis, I get then my final conclusions, my final feedback to the clinical evaluation report. Yes, that is important because I need to include all of the additionals or remaining effects, risks, clinical risks in alignment with the clinical evaluation report together with the risk analysis. That's something which has been called loss of deviations in the past with the notified bodies because they look into that, how is that compared between risk analysis and clinical evaluation. And please be brave and only add in clinical risks. Do not add all technical risks into the clinical evaluation report, because it will blow up the report with no benefit, because there's a different tool. So when you look into now the lowest line about the risk analysis, that gives 2 ways. One into the clinical evaluation report, all clinical risks, all side effects, everything what happens, everything which can happen based on technology, based on the product and whatever, from the side of the risks towards the clinical evaluation. And on the second side, also from the risk analysis to the risk management report. The technical stuff and the conclusional stuff. So now I got nearly everything graded up to the end. So I need to close it at the final stuff when I go from the clinical evaluation report and fill it into the risk management report. So many people of you might think now, well, however, when I look into MDCG or the documentations, we see a lot that the clinical evaluation report and the risk management report are interlinked to each other and should give the information from one report to the other and backwards. Yes, and then you run into a deadlock and will never come out. That's when you think about what MDCG has partly written, then you could consider that. However, the intentional point about it was that we have a linkage of the risk management system to the clinical evaluation lifecycle process. That is the interaction we need to take. And that is what I've done here, what I try to explain and show. I want to get you the explanation that you have at least one report at the end. I've seen many companies who tried to make clinical evaluation report and risk management report conclusive to each other and interlinking. If that would be the case, you can skip one of the reports and just write, this is my clinical and risk management evaluation report. Then you have one and do everything included there. However, that's also not the intention, because then it's not readable and understandable. Therefore, you need to segregate. And with the segregation, it leads to the point that you have one document prior to towards the other one. And we recommend always to have the risk management report as the last, because that is the summary of everything technically and clinically, whilst the clinical evaluation only has the clinical aspect and the risk analysis only has the technical aspect then anymore, because everything clinical is already covered by the second side. So you don't get blindsided in your risk management report, and you get a real good output for the product and for the product safety and the product performance. So the approach is that you have a clear linking structure. I prefer for that to do that in timing diagrams in my procedures to make sure that I have a good impact and a good impact analysis to see what happens at which step and which step concludes at which another one, to make sure we have a rounded, robust system. It sounds, when you read MDRs the first 20 times, it sounds all really horrible. Then you read MDCG, read them more, it's even worse. And then you go into all that stuff to make sure that you have the good and correct traceability, to ensure that you have the correct documentation available, and you have all the right outcomes at the point you need it. And that is the important point. You need to have the outcomes correctly, timely, and in a good shape at the moment you have your particular release to the market or to the notified body. That is your key point and where you need to go. And going back to my first line with that I play golf, that is when you have your next hit. You have found your ball, it is in play, and you have your next hit. And then comes the moment when the notified body does not agree with your solution. However, even in that case, if that happens, if whatever happens then with the notified body, please always, it's a regulation, you can handle accordingly and never give up to create good documentations in addition to create good requirements and good products. Because it will not help you anything if you have a good product which you can't bring to our nicely regulated market, and it will not bring you anything if you have good documentation but have a shitty product. So ensure that you have it done correctly with a good and clear explanation about the documentation, about the linkage, how you release, use timing diagrams, ask your electrical engineer to make sure that you have a good way how to interact. And then everything can be achievable quite easy, and your process is quite much nicer. Then, for that, I thank you for your attendance, and I am open now for many of the questions.